G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Vivian McKinnon from Hydro Ease, and she's based in Belfast, Ireland. Thanks for your time today, Vivian.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
How we know each other, Peter, our podcast producer, reached out and asked you to come on the cast. So maybe tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Sure, yeah. My business is a flotation centre, but we focus very much on trauma recovery. In Northern Ireland, we have 39% of the people who live here live with the impact of trauma. And a lot of that is down to the legacy of the Troubles. So I, in 2004, came across flotation myself while I was in recovery myself from trauma and addiction and seriously compromised mental health, going right back to adverse childhood experiences. So when I came to Northern Ireland and I realised there was no float centre here, I was kind of going, are you guys mental? Like, what? You know, you have the highest rate in the world for trauma and it's one of the most effective approaches. And I found myself saying, you'd think somebody would open a float centre. Everybody would benefit from a float centre. Why has nobody done it? And what I've learned in life is when you talk about somebody, nobody, everybody and anybody, it's generally the fingers are pointing back at you. You're the person with the idea. So yeah, we opened in 2015. So we are the only flotation centre in the whole of Northern Ireland, and we're the only trauma recovery centre in the whole of the island using flotation as one of the key therapeutic tools.
Yeah, great. Right. So maybe explain for the audience flotation, how that actually helps people with trauma.
Yeah, sure. So flotation involves 25 centimetres of body temperature water and half a tonne of Epsom salt. So when you get into that environment, what happens is you naturally just float on top of the water. Now, when you start to float, the 80% of energy that you usually would use for balance and movement and even just processing what you can see, hear, feel, smell and taste suddenly has absolutely no use anymore. So that 80% of energy turns inwards, which activates the blood flow and stimulates the lymphatic and the digestive system. Now, basically what that does for trauma is it starts to decompress, de-stress, reset and relax an overworked body that is generally coursing with cortisol and adrenaline and lactic acid, and it's really tight and tense. So it just allows the body that space to just relax, to find any internal healing and to just take a real introspective approach. But what we're finding, there was some research done at the Laureate Institute of Brain Research in Oklahoma, and what they found is that when they studied brains of the brains of veterans coming back from Afghanistan, that what they found was that through fMRI and EEG scans, flotation was starting to decrease activity in the left construct of the brain, and more importantly in the limbic system, and it was starting to shut off the fight or flight response. And this was a really key thing, because when you live with the symptoms of trauma, you're constantly in fight or flight. Sometimes it just bubbles away in the background and something can trigger you off and it makes it come right back up to the fore. But what it was also starting to do was it was starting to increase activity in the right constructs of the brain. So it was allowing people to kind of lie there, free from external stimulation, free from the impact of modern world and the fast-paced environment that we find ourselves within. And it was allowing the mind and the body to really connect in a way that it's not able to do in any other environment. And it was giving people a space where they could kind of look at the experiences that they've had from quite an emotionally detached viewpoint, to give them that perspective of, do you know what, that happened 10 years ago, and this is what I've learned from that. And it was helping people. What it also does is it starts to reset the ultradian rhythm, which again is that left and right brain function. And through doing that, it then starts to reset the circadian rhythm. So it meant that people were starting to find that their sleep was improving. And you know yourself, when you get a decent sleep, then you can pretty much cope with anything that goes on throughout the day.
Yeah, it's so important to be effective and healthy. So, a solid 8 hours sleep, definitely.
That's it.
All right, that's a great explanation. We'll get Peter just to cut out my little delay there. So how did you start out? 2015, what did you transition from?
So I had worked in the charity and voluntary sector. I had, as I say, in my background, I have a background of trauma and addiction. My mum was alcohol dependent. And when I was about 8 months old, I fell face first down a flight of concrete stairs in a baby walker. And then I had quite a lot of traumatic experiences as a kid, not directly at the hands of my mum and dad, but just through being left in vulnerable situations. So I started drinking alcohol when I was 8, started smoking cannabis when I was 13. I left home when I was 15. I was married by the time I was 18. I was homeless, living on the streets with a 1-year-old by the time I was 20, fleeing a domestic violence relationship. I then got into harder drugs, cocaine, amphetamine, various different things, until I almost died in 1999. And they thought it was meningitis. And I got taken to the hospital, and I was on intensive care on life support for 2 days. And basically my body and my mind had just said, we're not supporting this lifestyle anymore. We're not doing it. We're just not doing it. You're checking out.
Yep.
So, and before I even opened my eyes, Troy, there was this internal voice that was there constantly throughout my life. And it was the first thing that greeted me when I regained consciousness. And it just was, no wonder you're here. Look at the state of you. You should have your kids taken off you. Who's going to love you? You're not good enough. But there was another voice that was there that was just like, please stop this. So I started to volunteer. I went out first of all, I raised some money and I went out to China, and I walked over 100 miles of the Great Wall with 52 people I'd never met before in my life. And I challenged my panic, because I lived with panic disorder, and I challenged it every single day. And I got up every morning and I was like, right, panic, if you're coming, you come now. I sat in front of the mirror. A couple of mornings I actually managed to make it happen. But then later on in the day, what would happen is if I started to feel like I was going to have a panic attack, that softer voice was there kind of going, now hang on a minute. She gave you time this morning. And I certainly realized, wow, I control this stuff. Like, this doesn't control me. Like, I control it, and I can decide what happens. So when I came back from China, I volunteered in the charity and voluntary sector. This was in 2001 that I went to China. So it was 2003 that I went into the charity and voluntary sector. And I started to work with young people whose lives have been impacted by the care system. And within 6 months of being there, I had been offered a full-time job. They seen something in me that I'd never seen in myself, and really kind of set a belief that, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could support people to change. Maybe I could. And then my mum passed away. I went to go for therapy myself. And I think because I'd had so much adverse experiences, that when I was speaking to a counsellor, when I looked at her, her eyes just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And she kept just coming back with, so how did that make you feel? And I was like I want to punch you right in the fucking mouth.
That's a very honest answer.
I was like, for goodness sake, how do you think it made me feel? Yeah. And then I thought, I wonder how many, but you know what that done? That then got me to backtrack and step back into the silence, back into that vulnerability of trauma, back into that feeling of, I can't tell people this, nobody will understand anyway, so what's the point? Suck it up and get on. And then I went for CBT, and it was pretty much the same experience. And it just confirmed the beliefs. I am stupid. I am not good enough. Like all these things. And then
CBT, sorry, it's cognitive behavioural therapy, isn't it?
Yeah, cognitive behavioural therapy. And it's a fantastic approach, but it just wasn't for me.
Yep.
And then, so not long after that, there was just lots of different things that were happening at that time, lots of learnings, lots of different things happening, lots of realizations. And when in 2004 I went into a float tank for the first time on the advice of someone I worked with, and he just said, look, I think it'd be really good for you. Now, he never really knew my background, but he just obviously picked up on something. And I remember going for that first float and standing there and thinking, and it was like an egg-shaped sort of pod that you climbed in and you closed the lid on top of yourself. And I'm standing looking at it and I'm thinking, what the fuck? Like, I decided back in 1999 I was going to live. I decided on that hospital bed. Why would I climb in a coffin-like structure, close the lid on top of myself, in the darkness, I'm scared of the dark, in the total silence, with this voice that just never shuts up inside my own head? Why would I do that? But again, that voice was there, like, get over yourself, get in the bloody tank and try it. And within about 5 minutes, like, all the pain that I'd felt in my body that I had stored over the years from the experiences, because I firmly believe, you know, things like post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic stress injury is storing of trauma in the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. But storing of trauma in the body is things like fibromyalgia or arthritis or cancer even. And so I lay there and I just thought, wow, like, what's happened to my body? It just feels, and then my mind just went off. And I had this vision of standing on a stage. I had this vision of owning a float centre. I had this vision of bringing this modality to the people that really needed it. It just enabled me to reconnect the body and the mind, and almost like, it just gave me that vision of, you have a purpose, you're here for a reason, get out this tank and get started. So I went out and I said to the woman, do you know what happened? Like, this was amazing. And I felt this, and I seen this, and I had colours, and I had visions. And she said, yeah, it's a lovely spa treatment. And I was like, no. This is not a spa treatment. This is a mental health intervention. You should, this is how you should be, marketing this. This is what you should be. And she was just like, yeah. And I remember leaving there and thinking, I'm going to use this tool. I'm going to use this tool, and I'm going to heal the world. And everybody has to float. Our modern world is too frenetic. Everybody needs time away from themselves. They need time away from their mobile phone. They need time away from their office. They need time just to gather themselves and reset and rest and repair. And then there's this wee voice again, was like, how are you going to do that? You left school when you were 15. You were a total dropout. You're stupid. You're not good enough. But again, the other voice was like, well, go back to college, go to university. So went to college and I studied health and social care. And I became really interested in, like, our NHS system over here is totally on its knees. It's a fantastic system. It's a great, fantastic, amazing thing to have. But it's also to our detriment as well, because so many people rely on it. They think that they go to the doctor and the doctor has a magic pen and he writes this cure and you're given it and it's great and you wake up and you're going to be great. And that is not how it is, especially not in terms of mental health. Physical health, you walk out and get hit by a bus, it's the most amazing system, but for mental health, it's not. So I then got interested in psychology. So I went to university and studied social sciences and became really interested in group dynamics. Why do we become a different person depending on who we're in front of? And that really inspired me, because I thought, you know, all my life, I've tried to be someone to fit in. I've tried to be someone that somebody else would accept. So depending on who you were would depend on who I was. I could be whoever you wanted to be. I had such a fluid sort of sense of who I was, but no real understanding, and was always trying to fit in, so never belonged anywhere. And so from there, I then became really interested in, well, I'm a group of people. Inside me lives a group of people. What about if I understood them? What about if I set a CEO of me and started treating me like I'm a business, started treating me like, and all these other people that are living in me, Vivian, the abused child, Vivian, the domestic violence survivor, Vivian, the single mum, Vivian, the sister, the daughter. What about if I gathered all of these versions together and just kind of say, look, what are your needs? And why do you drive my behavior in a certain way? And that led me to neuro-linguistic programming. And then neuro-linguistic programming led me to a guy, Dr. Richard Bandler, who was one of the co-creators, which led me to a guy called Paul McKenna, who's quite a famous hypnotist. Done some training with him, which led me to these two doctors from New York who do a thing called the havening technique, which led me to that. So I've just constantly been on this quest. Moved to Northern Ireland in 2010 and then opened Hydroease in 2015 and blended together all of these skills, all of these tools, because what I found was the more I was learning about me and the more I was learning about human dynamics in general and how we be human, and the more I was talking to people, the more they were saying, wow, that makes perfect sense, Viv. Why are people not telling us that? Why? And I think for a while, for years, we kind of got caught up on the models and the theories that were developed and presented at the turn of the 20th century, you know, by people like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and all these great thinkers. but things have moved on so much. We know so much more about the brain now. We know so much more about how things impact us. But the one thing that's not happened, that's not been brought up to date, is us as humans. The equipment we use, our bodies and our minds, haven't evolved any further than they did hundreds of thousands of years ago. But our lifestyles have changed massively. I mean, our fingers prune, and that's, you know, that is to help us to catch fish and you know, climb out of rocks. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time I had to catch fish for my tea with my bare hands and then climb rocks to take it home. So we really, I think we're living in a time that you know, our bodies and our minds just haven't caught up with. And I started working throughout the charity and voluntary sector, and throughout that time I was developing these approaches, and I was restrained within the funding for these projects. You know, it was like that you've got this funding for 3 years and you need to hit these key indicators and these are your targets, and I'm like, but hang on a minute, these are people, we bring them in and we work with them how they present that day. Like, you just don't know what's happened in between one session and the next, so you can't have it as a program that they come in and they do this and then they do this and then they do this. Like, we're individual, and we need to see them as whole people. So when I opened Hydroys, as I say, that's when I decided that I was going to use all the skills and the tools that I had, and in with flotation therapy. And I work very much with brainwave states and looking at how our brain is when we encode trauma and how our brain is when we are calm and relaxed.
Well, Vivian, that is a very powerful journey that you've had, and well done for what you've achieved and what you are working on at the moment and achieving. I think it's wonderful. Yeah. And mental health obviously is becoming more and more important, more recognized, but I think also there's more mental health issues these days. Like you were saying before, with one aspect of that can be our lifestyles. People, you know, always on their phones and social media, and there's a big wave of issues coming. I've read about, particularly younger people can't really connect with when in the workplace, when they start in the workplace, because they haven't picked up the social cues from hanging out with people. It's all been online. So there's a whole lot of mental health issues, plus layer on top of that the last year with COVID. So it's a huge space.
And there was a big, huge shift, I think, Troy, in the 1980s, 90s, around, you know, children's rights, which was fantastic. It was amazing, and it needed to happen. But I think it went a bit far, and I think it went a bit where parents were, you know, there was a fine line between punishing your children and setting clear boundaries, you know. And I think when you constantly, obviously we want to put the best into our kids, and we want our kids to know that they can be and do anything that they want. I think there was a real something lost there, because now you have like young men and young women going out into the workplace, and you know, somebody sends them an email saying, oh my God, I can't believe you've done this, come into my office now, and they're straight into their fight or flight.
Yeah.
The fight or flight is to protect you from a burning building, get out of the way of a runaway car, or, you know, it's not because you've got an email from your boss. And I think there's been something fundamental lost there in terms of resilience of our children, and in terms of resilience just in the human spirit as it is. But yeah, I think we're going to have a huge wave. You know, people have been saying to me, you know, do you think we've hit the peak of what's happening with COVID? And I'm like, nowhere near it. Give it another couple of years, give it another 10 years, when we have a generation of young people, children who are maybe 10 years old, who are maybe like 12, 13, 14, 15 at that time, who grew up, who were in this time where the caregivers around them were so consumed with germs and so consumed with wearing masks and keeping clean and washing and scrubbing and all these things. I think it's just a powder keg that we're in just now in terms of mental.
Yeah. Well, do you have some key numbers you can share with illustrate the growth of the business in the last 6 years?
Yes. So we started off in September 2015. So we registered the business on the 1st of April 2015. So by the time we came for the end of March, which was the end of our financial year, our turnover had been about £24,500. And, you know, I opened the business and I thought, like, this is amazing. I'm going to open the door and I'm going to say to everybody, we're open, and there's going to be a queue of people down the road. Yep. I had done no marketing because I never knew anything about marketing. Taking into account, it's the very first time I'd ever had a business, and I only started it because my husband called me a wage slave and said that I had this fantastic idea and I was doing nothing about it, and I was like, oh, I'm not a wage slave. So to even take £24,500 in the first 6 months was like, was amazing, especially for a small country like Northern Ireland. There's only 1.6 million people here.
Yep.
And then in the next year, which was our first full year, we took nearly £60,000. So we had doubled and some, you know, so there was a good sort of 20%, over 20% increase. And then last year we took 126,000. So in the space of a few years, you know, we've managed to really grow and develop. And a lot of that is now because I'm recognised by, I'm a part of a commissioned service. So Department for Health and the Health and Social Care Board fund certain projects. So people go in for tenders for hundreds of thousands of pounds, and then other people get subcontracted in. And because I'm a very specialist trauma recovery support service, where I work in post-traumatic growth, so I work with people who are at the point where there maybe something's totally sticking them, or there's something that they can't quite get past, and they've done counselling, they've done all these other things. So to have Department for Health funding is absolutely amazing. So it's a real big recognition. So in the last year, that's what has kind of helped our growth as well, is to be seen that, you know, in other places, we'd done the first lockdown, and then we had another lockdown in sort of October, November time, and we were allowed to stay open then because we had managed to prove that we were part of a commissioned service, which made us ancillary to mental health. And that whole process of going through that and having the council trying to close us down, and the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, saying we could stay open, and having this real challenge. It was a time where I learned so much about the business. I learned so much about me. I learned so much about, we have a thing over here called SIC, which is the Standard Industry Classification Codes, that I knew nothing about, Troy, absolutely nothing about, until all this happened, where there was this, no, you can open, no, you can't, no, you can open. I had a legal team involved, so I learned a lot about the law around this, and so yeah, it's been a great 5 years, and in terms, as I say, of financial growth, we're ready for. I wanted to expand last year, sort of towards the end of 2019. Something held me back. I don't know what it was. I do a lot of work with the universe, where I visualize things and I put them out there, and then I work towards them, and it's almost like ordering something from a catalogue. Like, I believe that I've already got it, and I make space for it in my life. And so I had kind of started doing that, but then just my gut was like, something not right. And I'm so glad I did, because had I have expanded when I wanted to expand, it was going to be about March or April last year.
Right. COVID.
So yeah, exactly.
What about team members? Did you start just the one FTE yourself?
Yep. So it started with just me, and then we now have 6 members of staff.
Great.
And again, that brings its challenges as well, Troy. Like, I had a girl who was with me full time, and she was amazing. She was great. She was brilliant for the business for that point that we were at. But she then, you know, COVID happened, and then she came back after COVID, and there were so many different things that had changed, I suppose, in the business and in her life. And we opened again in the July last year, and she'd left maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that.
Yeah, right.
So it was, but again, that was a huge learning period. It was a huge learning process. I realised how much she knew about the business that I had kind of almost like just handed over in a way. That, you know, getting back in the business and solidly getting my feet back in behind the counter, because I'd spent a lot of time, like I do public speaking as well. So I'd spent a lot of time, you know, developing that side of the business and really getting us to where we could start getting these contracts and stuff. So it was a nice time just to get back in and get my feet back into the business and really start to get a feel for how it was now. Because for the last couple of years, I was so busy working on the business that I had stepped out of the business. It was nice getting back in again.
And when was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
The moment I felt like I succeeded, right? And this is still the most amazing highlight of having Hydro. So there's 2 moments. One is standing on the stage at the 16th annual mental health conference at McGee campus, which is the Ulster University campus up in Londonderry, and giving a lecture on mental health to mental health nurses, students, psychologists, consultants, who were all in the audience, and they were all there to listen to me. So there was that. And then we facilitated Dr. Gabor Mate's first and only ever float. Now, Dr. Gabor Mate is a worldwide renowned physician from British Columbia in Canada, and he does a lot of work in mental health and addiction and adult ADHD. And it was a huge honour. He was in town for a conference, and I had his email address through something else that I'm working on, but he was included in the email, and I was just like, oh my God, I have his email address. And I really wanted to email and say, I'm your biggest fan. And then I thought, no, he's going to be like, fucking Sado, who is she? So when we had him, it was absolutely amazing. It was such an honour to have him with us.
Yep, great. And what does success look like to you?
Success looks like to me, success is being happy. Success is being able to have a great work-life balance. Success is hearing my son saying to his friend, my mum's dead cool, she just makes people's lives better.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's terrific. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Now, when I first opened Hydro's, I'd done no marketing at all, as I've said. One of the things I would say for marketing a business is to understand the business, understand what it is that you're actually marketing. Where are your people? If your people, are your people on Facebook? Are your people reading the paper, going on the train to their work in the morning? Are your people hanging about the leisure centre? So the first thing I would say with marketing a business is understand your audience, find out where they are, and then target them from there.
Yeah, definitely. And what about funding your business? Did you have investors or bank finance along the way, or any grants?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. My husband, as I say, called me a wage slave and moved me to action pretty quickly after that. And he had put in for some funding for 35 hours of free business advice. When we went for that, when I'd got the business plan and everything, and I went back home and I says to Tommy, we were talking about having just one float tank and a one-to-one room so I could have like a therapy practice. And then the more I kind of got into it and the more I really sort of wanted to actualize this dream, I was like, I want it to be a healing center and I want to have 2 float tanks, but I don't want to have the egg-shaped pods because it almost stopped me from going in. So what I'll do is I contacted the Laurie Institute of Brain Research. Their cabins were made by a company in Norfolk in England. So I contacted Floataway in Norfolk in England and got them to make me cabins that are 7 feet in height and 6 feet by 8 feet. But these cost £26,500 each. Tommy had said, so before I even knew the price of them, I'd kind of went back to Tommy and said, well, look, if we're going to do this, I know you've got like 27 grand. I was like, if you believe in me that much, you give me it for the business. And he went, right. And I was like, shit, now I really need to do this. So to cut an even bigger story short, I packed in my full-time job from the charity and voluntary sector. I was working for a company called FASA. It was a Forum for Action on Substance Abuse and Suicide Awareness. And I spent his life savings and I then put myself £66,000 in personal debt. Mm-hmm. And just chased the dream, just believed 100% that I could not fail. Now, taking into account, fail stands for first attempt in learning. Yep. So I just knew that I couldn't, I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. This is what I was here to do. This was my purpose. And people would listen to me. I would make sure people listened to me. Yeah. So yeah, I've now paid off all that debt.
Great.
My husband was my business partner, and then that was challenging at times, shall we say. And then I bought him out during lockdown as well. So I bought him out last year. So the business is now fully 100% mine, and we've nearly paid that loan off as well.
Great. And if you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry? I think I know the answer to this.
Absolutely. Every time. I just live and breathe flotation therapy. I live and breathe the fact that, see if you go to a therapist and they're working with either the body or the mind, we use our knowledge of the human mind and body through the theories, the models, the books, the papers, the research that we've personally looked into, or our personal experiences. If you're working with the body, it's the same. If you're a physio or you're a reflexologist or whatever. But see, when you get into a float tank, it's your mind and body using its knowledge of your mind and body, and nobody else knows you in that way. So yeah, absolutely, I'd go into the same industry. I'd go into it with no money and beg and borrow and steal to do it.
Right. And what have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
What I've enjoyed least about managing fast growth would be forgetting to take time to myself sometimes.
Yep.
Really good. I have a brilliant self-care routine. I have, I float once a week unless I'm busy, and then I try to float twice. I drink 2 liters of water every day. I sleep for 8 hours every night. I keep my diet pretty clean. And then I go to the gym. But then during lockdown, the gym closed down, and then we had all of this challenges with all these different things. And then I found I was getting to the end of the day and I drank half a litre of water. And then I was finding that I was starting to eat just rubbish on the go.
Yep.
And then I was finding I wasn't sleeping very well at night. And so I think the challenging thing for me is was the biggest challenge in growing the business and trying to also pivot the business as well. Because during lockdown, I then started putting more stuff online, started doing classes online. So there were lots of different things. So I think the challenge is just to remember that you're just as important as everybody else.
Yep. And what do you love most about growing a small business?
I just love the autonomy. I love I love not being under anybody else's banner, having an idea and saying, I'm going to make that happen. Yep. And not having somebody going, oh, well, you need to run it by them and you need to make sure you've got this. It's like, no, I'll make it happen. I will make it happen.
And what's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
The biggest mindset shift is that I don't have to do it all. And I can choose who I want to work with. I don't, just because somebody wants to come and work with me doesn't mean to say they're the right fit for me. Yep. And just because someone has a shitload of cash doesn't mean to say that they are, I think for me, it's like, remember who you are, and money, don't let money sway your values or, just keep on the road you're on.
Yep. And what's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Definitely self-care. Be friends with you. Don't sell out on your values. Remember that the one person who's with you from your first breath until your last breath is you. So be your own best friend.
Totally agree. Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course and add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? And so those 6 you've got, they're not all full-time. So what would your FTE be, full-time equivalent?
3.2.
There you go. Yeah.
Worked out to be 3.2. The thing, and again with recruitment, like I done one recruitment drive, and it was when she just went off, so she was full time. One of the other girls that works with me is a friend of mine, but we're very, I wouldn't say we're similar in some ways, but very different in other ways. So she started off just volunteering for me, and then came on board. One of the other members of staff is my daughter, and she works on a Saturday for me, which has been great as well. So there's been no real issues there. In the recruitment drive, we got I think we got 34 people that had applied for the job, and we interviewed 6 of them. And sometimes the person who does the best interview is not always the best person for the job. Yep. And I was swayed with a member of staff by a couple of other people, and I thought, yeah, do you know what, that'll be great, and it worked out to be a wee bit of a disaster. So, but again, you only ever win or learn. There's nothing really in between there, do you know? And so if something's not the outcome that you exactly wanted it to be, then what did you learn from the experience of doing that? Yeah,
well, that's what I was going to ask. So what do you do now differently for recruitment to make sure you're not, tricked by someone's personality, or they're putting it on and you can't really see their weaknesses, or that they're an arsehole?
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, what I do is, what I've found now of what I've done this time is I've asked so many scenario-based questions. Yep. So say you were in the centre and this happened, what would you do?
It's called behavioural-based interviewing. It's quite common these days and very important. Yeah, and the more questions you ask, like this podcast, I try to shut up as much as I can because I want the guests to be speaking. But 80 to 90% of the conversation in an interview should be the person being interviewed should be the one talking. And the more you get them to talk, the more rounds of interviews you do, obviously, the more data you're going to have to make a decision on whether they're the right fit for you.
And I remember, like, we have a young man, Henry, who came in as an apprentice for us, and he came for the interview. And Henry is amazing. He was quite awkward in the interview, and he had a suit on that was a wee bit too big for him, and he was straight out of university, but he was so endearing. There was something so lovely about him. And we got talking, and I was asking him various different questions, and he was so honest, and some of his views were really controversial, but I was like, do you know what? I like you. Yeah. I like you. Because he was open, he was honest, he was just, and Henry's still with us. He's done a 2-year apprenticeship with us, and then he's been with us for another 8 months on the back of that. He does our social media and stuff.
That's
and
great.
He's brilliant. And the thing is, you're not going to get it right every single time with you. And if you do, then that's amazing and well done. But you're going to have people that interview really well, that give you the answers really well, that give you. We had a girl that came and she done the interview. And then she asked if she could come and volunteer for us. And I was like, yeah, of course. And she was amazing. She spoke really well. She got on really well with the clients. And then one day just never turned up. Yeah. And my phone just saying, is everything okay? And then she got back a couple of days later. Oh, yeah, something came up with my mum. Sorry, I meant to say. And so then another couple of things happened. So then when a position did come up, I just thought, even although it was a volunteering position, it's still down to common decency.
Yeah. Right.
So she never got offered the position, but she hadn't came back anyway. So yeah. you just never know. It's just a chance you have to take. And again, it's about understanding that not everybody's going to get your business the way you do, and not everybody's going to work in it the way you do, and not everybody's going to have the same vision and the same aims that you do. Like I know for me, like Hydroease is my baby. It's like I just love watching people coming in with their heads down and their shoulders turned round and not really giving eye contact, and then leaving like, oh my God, that was amazing, and their heads up and they're so relaxed, and then seeing them coming back and watching that journey for them. And see, when you get a staff member that just links into that, and every staff member we have now, they all talk about the journey. They all talk about, oh, I remember when they first came in, and look at them now, and you can really see it lights them up. But you only find that out over time. It's not something that you can tell from a job interview.
And what are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Listen to your staff and give them option. Go to them and say, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Because the thing is, as much as like I have a head full of ideas for my business. I have but sometimes I really just need pulled down. I need somebody to put my feet on the floor sometimes. Yep. So I would just say, talk to your staff, talk to them and find out what kind of ideas they have.
And tell our audience how you've handled balance.
How I've handled balance is again, just looking after myself, just making sure, but also making sure that the staff are doing the same. Like we have a team meeting the last Wednesday of every month. And the first thing we start with the team is, personally, how are you? And we go around the table. Personally, how are you? We have fruit, and we have teas and coffees and bottles of water, and sometimes we have buns, sometimes we have breakfast rolls or whatever it is. And it's like, personally, how are you? How's things been? How's your mum? You remember you were saying about your son, blah blah blah. Right, business wise, how's things been? Do you is there anything that you can be supported with? Is there any training needs that you've identified? And then we go down, right, let's go to the agenda. What's changed this month? What's new on the system? What's new? So having that balance in work is, I think, very much starts with, personally, how are you?
Yep.
I think that's really important.
What about professional development? You obviously went to college and university, and then more recently, since you've started the business 6 years ago, have you done much professional development courses,
Absolutely.
books?
Yeah, every year I would do something. So I've done, as I say, I've done neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, hypnosis. I have a master practitioner in all of them. Yep. I then went on and done the Havening practitioner. I then I go to quite a lot of conferences and stuff. I do quite a lot of online stuff. I have, usually every year I take on a mentor of some sort, sometimes just for a couple of months, sometimes for the whole year. Yep. It really depends, and I always make sure that it's, that I change my mentor, because you'll learn different things from different people. So and again, it's just, I'm like a squirrel. you know, a squirrel away. I like to know different, I study excellence. I look at other people and think, right, they're doing that really well. How do I get to work with them?
That's great. No, I think you're ahead of at least most small business owners, I think, because they don't really value or invest in professional development. But if you can build that habit that you are
Yeah.
showing a
I
few
think
hours.
I read something somewhere that says you should spend a minimum of 30% of your earnings on personal development every year.
Yep.
It's just a really good, I think it's just a really good practice to get into.
Yeah, I think if you carve out, you know, a handful of hours a week at the very least to be reading a book or listening to a podcast or audio book, you know, doing an online course, or, you know, I just think it's just a great habit to have.
Yeah.
You mentioned mentors, so you've had mentors or coaches along the way. You can tell us about that experience and the value they've added.
Yeah, some mentors have added more than others. Some mentors have been by chance. Some mentors have been people I've just worked alongside, as opposed to actually, you know, physically paying for someone and employing someone. During lockdown, I joined a mentoring group, and I quite enjoyed that. I'm not sure I learned too much from it. There were some things I think were galvanized more for me. There were some things that reminded me of other stuff that I was like, oh, I've not done that for a while. But the networks, see when you do so, like, your network is your net worth. And when people know you, people like you, and people trust you, then they'll buy from you, especially in my industry. But even like I've taken on a mentor just now, actually. I start with her in the beginning of March, a woman from North America. And because I want to open up the North American market for me. And I've started a collaboration with one of the girls that I met through the mentoring group that I was in last year. And her and I just got on really well, very similar values, very similar ethos, very focused, and she's very sort of strategy. I'm big ideas, and so we work really, really well together. So the two of us have invested together to have this mentor from North America, and she's going to get us corporate clients because we've put together a corporate program. So yeah, I'm always involved in something.
Yeah, fantastic. And do you have a board of directors or advisors?
No, I don't, but I sit on a board of directors. I'm a director for a charity in Northern Ireland called PIPS, which is a public intervention for the prevention of suicide. So I sit on their board.
Yep. All right, Vivian, on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
The hardest thing in growing a small business is keeping in the present. I think we constantly, I now have a daily mantra. Every morning in the shower I do havening, and I have my mantra. My mantra every day is the only expectation I have of today is no expectations. Because what I found was happening was when things weren't going my way, I was kind of like, oh, what can I do? How can I? And I was getting frustrated with myself. But equally, when I was setting goals and achieving the goals, I was then going, right, what's my next goal? Right, what's my next goal? And what I was failing to do, or what I was sort of stopping myself from doing, was sitting and taking the time to actually realize what the success of that goal means for me. And what I generally find is that it opens up another door. There's another opportunity. So just because you've achieved that goal, that's not the end of the goal. It's almost like getting to the top of the mountain. When you're at the top of the mountain, that's not you successfully climbed the mountain, because you've still got to get back off the mountain.
That's a good analogy.
So sometimes, so I think, I just always remind myself that, right, hang on, let's have a look at what's happening right here and right now.
Yeah, great. And favorite business book, which has helped you the most?
Business books, Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, absolutely. Great book.
When I got introduced to that, I was like, because I've seen myself as a connector, a maverick, and a salesperson. And the person who recommended the book said, you will see yourself throughout this whole book. Second one is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Greber. And again, when I first opened Hydroease, the people I bought the cabins off, they recommended I read that. And Start With Why, Simon Sinek.
Yeah, that's good. E-Myth's first book I recommend people to read before they're thinking of starting a business, or if they're looking at growing their business, definitely read that book. And Starting With Why and Simon Sinek's TED Talk is excellent as well. Yeah. Any great podcasts for online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Yeah, podcast, Brené Brown. Love the whole shame and vulnerability thing, just resonates with me so well. And I think when you show up and you step into your vulnerability, you invite other people people to do exactly the same. Learning tools, anything by Dr. Gabor Mate, wholehearted.org. They've got some great trainings on there. So yeah, that's where I'm at just now. I mean, this year I've done Gabor's course, I've taken on a new mentor, new business collaboration, signed up for a breathwork course the other day there, and I've taken on a health creations course coach as well. So looking at that whole sort of 360 view of me as a person.
Great. And one tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
One tool I would recommend to help grow a small business is mindset.
Yep.
Working on your mindset. And people talk about the growth and the fixed mindset, but there's a mindset that nobody talks about that's in the middle of that, and it's that belief mindset. It's the belief that you can move from the fixed to the growth, and believing that you deserve it, believing that you can do it, believing that you are worthy, believing that you're good enough to do it. And then once you start to believe that stuff, then you start to grow. So yeah, be mindful of your mindset.
And finally, my favorite question, what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Day one of starting out, I would say, you've got this. Get out there and smash it, girl.
Yep. Great. Well, thanks for your time today, Vivian. I think the audience will get a lot of value out of your story and your journey. It's very powerful and wonderful success, not just financially as well, but you're clearly very passionate about your purpose and doing great things as well as running and growing a business. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.